I solemnly swear there will be no jump scares in this video. I promise. Horror. You're either supposed to love it or completely hate it. No shame in hating it though, you're kinda supposed to. Disgust and fear are two of the most primal emotions we as humans can experience. These are feelings that our brain give us when we go into a dark room and hear an unexpected noise, when you turn on a light and see a large spider crawling on the floor, or the sheer terror of waking up on your couch at 2 a.m. to the George Lopez show.
Those are your mom's pants, they're a 50, man. Mel told me to fire you, you're obese and you're gonna die.
That's not funny. That's not...
Video games have a long history of incorporating horror into the medium. You of course have the survival horror titans of Resident Evil and Silent Hill, but horror also makes its way into game franchises that you might not expect. Half-Life, The Legend of Zelda, Mario, hell, even Pokemon all have some horror elements in many of their titles. In the mid-2000s, the horror genre saw the release of some landmark IPs including Fear and Left 4 Dead. One game in particular that was released around this time that I have heard the praises sung for the longest time has been Dead Space. Now I have a little experience with this series in the past as I have played one of these games, and that's Dead Space 3.
It's so bad.
Yeah, it was painfully mid, and even as a teenager who played nothing but shooters at the time, I still thought this game was dreadfully dull. I only played the first couple hours of Dead Space 3 before putting the franchise on the shelf with little to no interest in returning. That was up until a few years ago. I started seeing many content creators talking about how the series, especially with the first game, was truly something special in the survival horror genre. Then I saw the announcement for the Callisto Protocol and I thought, damn, that looks a lot like Dead Space. Oh shit, I see why. Shortly after, a full-fledged remake of the first game was announced. It was at this point that I began asking myself why this series started getting all of the attention that it did. What did I miss out on that has made it so popular with the modern gaming landscape? Today, I'm looking to answer those questions and more as I share with you my experience of Dead Space. Dead Space's development goal was simple: make people shit their pants. With such a simple premise, it's actually kind of ironic with how much the game flip-flop focuses during its dev time. So Dead Space was developed by Redwood Shores, who would go on to become Visceral Games. Now Redwood Shores were no rookies when it came to game development, releasing several landmark titles throughout the early to mid 2000s. They put out classic games such as Tiger Woods PGA Tour 2000, Tiger Woods PGA Tour 2001, Tiger Woods PGA Tour 2002, and Tiger Woods PGA Tour 2003. Yo, it's fucking golf. How many of these games do they need? 8? They made 8 Tiger Woods games? No wonder Dead Space is so violent. I'd be homicidal too if I had to make the same game 8 fucking times. They had a few other titles too, including the Simpsons games, the Godfather game, and the decently underrated Lord of the Rings games. So yeah, not a great back catalog for this studio, but they kind of knew this at the time too, as they expressed their interest in moving away from licensed material. The next project that Redwood Shores would begin to work on was agreed to be a horror game. The game drew great influence from System Shock, and even one designer saying that the game was initially supposed to be the third game in that series. Whether that's true or not remains unclear, but what is known is that all of that went out the window after a little title called Resident Evil 4 was released. Yeah, this is a game that completely revolutionized the industry, let alone the survival horror genre. So much so that Dead Space creator, Glenn Schofield, basically changed direction of the game to a more action-oriented approach after seeing what RE4 had done. He had one vision for the game now: Resident Evil 4
In space!
Well, that and changing the shooting mechanics so you don't have to stop and aim, but other than that, Redwood Shores' goal was clear. Of course, there were plenty of other influences outside of gaming that the team took inspiration from. I mean, the inspiration from the Alien movie series should be painfully obvious, but the film Event Horizon also played a huge part in the way that Dead Space tells its story. The developers also credited the French film Martyrs as an inspiration. I won't show you any clips from this movie, but let's just say that if you're familiar with the violence in Dead Space, Martyrs makes it look like a Kirby game by comparison. Absolutely brutal movie. Speaking of brutal, Redwood Shores had some interesting struggles when creating a prototype for the game. They originally demoed the game on an original Xbox while utilizing the same engine that they used to make their Godfather game. Alright, let's recap real quick. We have a studio who has made nothing but golf games, that wanted to make a System Shock sequel, that then decided to make a Resident Evil 4 in space game using a French exploitation film as inspiration, while also being built on a shitty licensed game engine for last-gen hardware. And what was the name of the game that they came up with for this title? Rancid Moon. Gross. Sounds like a disaster to me. Who was publishing this? There's no fucking way. How did EA, the money-grubbing fucks that they are, greenlight this? Well, thankfully the name didn't stick, and it was eventually changed to Dead Space, but surely this game could not have performed well given all the circumstances, right? Well, in October of 2008, we finally had our answer. Dead Space was launched to the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3, and a week later was released on PC. And the game was really fucking good. No, seriously, the game was a critical darling, scoring in the high 80s across all platforms. Jeff Haynes from IGN was quoted as saying, "Call it science fiction survival horror, but Dead Space does the genre proud with an engaging story, action that's tense, fast-paced, and extremely violent, as well as atmospheric qualities that will get under your skin and make you jump." The game went on to win many awards, especially in the audio and visual departments for its score, sound effects, animations, and lighting. Commercially though, it did seem to underperform EA's expectations, due to what they say was stiff sales competition at the time. Oh come on, what else could have released in the month of October that could have possibly sold more than Dead Spit? Alright, EA, fair enough. But seriously, for the month of October, Dead Space was the 10th highest selling game, falling behind the likes of Fallout 3, Fable 2, Saints Row 2, Little Big Planet. Hell, even Mario Kart Wii was still selling shitloads of copies half a year after its launch. However, sales eventually did pick up, and an event that mirrored what happened with BioShock the year prior, the critical praise boosted the game's sales by over twice the amount between October and November, and by February 2009, the game had sold over 1 million copies, but was still ultimately seen as a commercial flop by EA. Clearly, something had to be here though. Regardless of the game's poor financial success, audiences and critics both adored it. That was apparently enough to warrant 2 sequels too, so EA must have seen something with this IP. So what was it that had everybody falling in love with this game? How does it hold up today? Well, let's turn the lights off, take a step back to 2008, and get a fresh pair of undies as we dive into what is often considered one of the scariest games of all time. First, let's take a look at the story of Dead Space. So hey, if you don't want this nearly 15-year-old game spoiled for you, please skip to this time in the video. The year is 2508. Earth has experienced a near extinction level crisis due to the reckless use of its own natural resources, and what I must assume to be an order from Emperor Elon Musk VI himself. The remainder of humankind must now mine other planets to take their resources so that we as a species may survive. This is where the Concordance Extraction Corporation, or CEC for short, steps in. This megacorporation develops a new ship called the USG Ishimura to begin harvesting planets for their resources to bring back to Earth. During the... Sorry, I can't keep this voice up the whole video. During the 35th expedition of the Ishimura, the ship stopped by Aegis 7, but shortly sent a distress signal back to the CEC. The CEC then sends a group on board the USG Kellyan in order to investigate the Ishimura. This is where we meet some of our main characters. First, we have Zach Hammond, the senior security officer who just wants to get the job done. Next, we have Kendra Daniels, a technologist brought to repair the communication system of the ship, but seems very untrusting of Hammond. Finally, we have Isaac Clarke, who I think can introduce himself best. Ah, I see he went to the Gordon Freeman Communications course for shooter protagonists. Very nice. We also see a video from a girl named Nicole Brennan, Isaac's girlfriend and main motivator to go to the Ishimura. Ah, I see he also went to the Arthur from Ghosts and Goblins seminar for video game characters to be motivated by pussy. Respect. In order to get Isaac laid, we have a job to get done, so Isaac goes to check the damage reports and... oh shit. Oh fuck, oh my god, we need to go, we need to run, oh shit, oh fuck, oh shit. Oh, phew, that was, oh fuck. Yeah. Anyways, Isaac arms himself with the trusty plasma cutter and then eventually meets back up with Hammond and Daniels to find out that most of the ship's systems have failed. And even worse, an asteroid belt nearby is posing some danger to the Ishimura. After repairing the tram station and attempting to return to the Kellyan, we are met with the unfortunate reality for Isaac that this game is longer than one level. Isaac then sets out to repair the ship's functions, while also finding out what happened to Nicole, where did these creatures come from, and what he can do to stop them. The next several hours, the plot takes a backseat while Isaac Isaac repairs different parts of the ship to give us the breadcrumb trail of exactly what the hell is going on. Isaac finds audio and text logs detailing a number of key events in the lore of Dead Space. The previous captain was an agent of the Church of Unitology, which is essentially Scientology, but still less stupid since this actually has something real to go off of. Still a wacky religious cult though. The group was after something called the Red Marker, which they believe held the secrets to human creation, and they knew that the Red Marker was located on Aegis 7. So they performed a sort of mutiny on the Ishimura in order to retrieve the Red Marker to further their knowledge. One problem though. Removing the Red Marker from the planet caused mass hysteria, causing large-scale homicidal and suicidal impulses for anyone close to the Red Marker.
This one is on me. Gentlemen, my bad.
After the mining, or planet cracking as they call it, a group of unknown organisms infiltrated the mining colony of Aegis 7 and began infecting the bodies of the dead. These are the necromorphs, the same things that we saw on the Ishimura. This caused the captain of the Ishimura to disable all communications and transportation with the colony below. This didn't stop one ship from making its way back to the Ishimura with a necromorph in tow, eventually causing the Ishimura to be overrun. The chief science officer, Dr. Terrence Kine, said, "Hey dude, this is kind of fucked. Maybe we should call for help." But the captain said, "Are you kidding me? If the CEC knew we were in a restricted area, they'd kill me." Dr. Kine, running out of patience and out of options, does the only logical thing by jamming a syringe through the captain's eye. He originally wanted to sedate the captain, but hey, Dr. Kine is just too goddamn good at his job, so he gave him the ultimate subdual. Oh, also we ran into this guy named Callus Mercer, who is supposed to be one of our main antagonists, I guess. He's another Unitologist fanatic who really just serves as a way to express what the cult believes and how they act to the player. I think he is probably the weird fucker that is writing all the markings on the walls and lighting these candles, but I'm not sure. He's pretty inconsequential to the plot otherwise, and is killed by Isaac before the end of the game. We also run into Nicole again, who much to Isaac's dismay, isn't as horny as he had previously hoped for.
Make us whole again.
I'm sure that is not the hole he's thinking of, but I get it. It's hard to get in the mood when there are alien zombies moaning and groaning everywhere. Anyways, further distrust seems to divide Hammond and Daniels as Hammond shot out an escape pod that had a necromorph on board, which was intercepted by a military ship called the USM Valor. The Valor ends up crashing into the Ishimura, which is strangely fortunate for our heroes as Isaac is able to retrieve a singularity core that he may use to power another ship on board the Ishimura. Isaac also finds some information and clues, leading him to believe that the people on board the Valor already knew about the alien threat. Interesting. When attempting to repair an escape shuttle, Hammond is killed by one of the necromorphs, and Isaac eventually gets contacted by Dr. Kine. The good doctor has definitely seen better days, as he shares that the hive mind is controlling all of the necromorphs, and the only way to stop the threat is to return the slab. He also begins speaking to his wife, who is revealed to be dead. Interesting again. I wonder if... Yeah, the game doesn't take too long to reveal the major plot twists, as Daniels is revealed to be working for the USM when she murders Dr. Kine in order to bring the marker back to Earth. She reveals the Red Marker was placed here to study the effects that it had, and the weird symbols are actually the DNA pattern for the necromorph infection, which is kind of cool. The other major plot twist is revealed shortly after Isaac brings the Red Marker back, as Nicole has been dead the whole time. What? I know, how unexpected. The marker was supplying visions of Nicole in order to have Isaac do its bidding. Anyways, Isaac finishes off the hive mind and begins to return home. We finally get to see the end of the video that we saw at the beginning of the game, culminating with Nicole's suicide. Isaac sits there, blue-balled and teary-eyed, as he looks out into space, saddened by the loss of his lover. Oh, wait. So the story of Dead Space isn't anything truly amazing, if I'm being perfectly honest with you. The characters are ones that you've seen a million other times in horror fiction and other video games, and really none of them are that special. Mercer is like every religious nut, Hammond is like every other can-do military guy, and Isaac is... serviceable. The dialogue also only has one purpose, and that is exposition. Characters really only exist to move the plot along, and I felt absolutely nothing when another character was speaking. The plot twists are also incredibly obvious right from the get-go. As soon as you see the distrust between Hammond and Daniels, it's incredibly obvious she knows more than she's leading on. Hell, I said Nicole was dead right from the second she appeared on screen. The game itself even spoils that for you, see? The first letter of every mission spells out the biggest spoiler in the game. That being said, there wasn't anything overtly bad here either. In fact, there were some things that I found enjoyable. The way the story was paced was really well done. I really liked the few chapters that the main plot took a back seat to let world building, gameplay, and atmosphere take center stage. I liked all of the optional audio and text logs that allowed those who are more interested in the world to take an extra opportunity to learn more about it. All in all, story-wise, I can't say that I hated my time with Dead Space. I got the same amount of enjoyment that I did from the story as I would if I closed my eyes, scrolled through Hulu, and picked a horror movie at complete random. And for that, I can say I was moderately satisfied. Defining a piece of horror fiction by its story alone does a massive disservice to the work. Halloween is about a guy in a mask who killed a bunch of people. The Exorcist is about a girl that was possessed by a demon. And Alien is about, well, an alien.
Get back inside. I'll get you when we've eaten them.
Instead, what makes those films special is the atmosphere, the performances, and the way the setting comes to life, or in this case, how it displays death. Dead Space is no different. It's easy to call the game's story derivative, because it honestly kind of is. Where the game truly shines is how it presents this experience to the player, and it does a really fucking good job. The first thing I really want to talk about is how Dead Space handles its UI. Now, most games from this era have some UI elements that frankly have aged very poorly. My standpoint on user interfaces in games is that a good UI typically goes unnoticed, a bad UI takes away from the experience, and an amazing UI has you asking why more games aren't doing this. Dead Space falls into the latter category, and here's why. Have you noticed there's no health bar in the corner of the screen? Have you noticed there is no ammo counter in any of the corners either? What about the lack of a mini-map, quest log, or any of those other screen-polluting things you would typically see in this style of game? This information is still easy to obtain, but Dead Space does something a little different with it. See that little meter on Isaac's back? See that little counter above his weapon? That is your health and ammo, on display as you need it, built into Isaac's character design. The map? You pull up a hologram that displays all the relevant information you may need without pausing the game. Redwood Shores were dedicated to keeping the player immersed, all the way down to what was being displayed on your screen at all times. This is still just the tip of the iceberg, as the immersion that is on display on the Ishimura goes unprecedented for the action horror genre. Dead Space is a game that was released back in 2008, yet still somehow looks pretty decent by today's standards. Now, don't get me wrong, the game definitely has some low-quality textures, some slightly stiff animations, and the occasional Mass Effect Andromeda face, but the vast majority of the game is presented very well. Graphically speaking, the game isn't anything too marvelous, but a stellar art style really has helped this game stand the test of time. This can best be exemplified in the setting and enemy character design. You'd think for being the inside of a spaceship, the Ishimura would be rather limited in the environmental detail, but this couldn't be further from the truth. Some of the most interesting locations the game has to offer are an overrun botanical lab, the outside of the ship during an asteroid shower. Hell, you can even explore the inside of the USM Valor after it crashes into the Ishimura, and that was really cool. And all of these levels culminate with a trek through Aegis 7's surface. Now, don't get me wrong, the game also has the dark corridors and the mechanical engine rooms you'd expect, but even these take cues from classic jagged Gothic architecture with less emphasis on the slick sci-fi look you typically see on a fictional spaceship. The variety of the levels were truly outstanding, but even that doesn't compare to what we see when it comes to the necromorphs. The necromorphs are truly a repulsive breed. Apparently, when creating the concept art for these creatures, the designer used medical photos from car crash injuries in order to make the contorted forms from the necromorphs even more repulsive. I'm not sure if that's true or not, but either way, mission fucking accomplished. These enemies look simply disgusting. You have the standard slashers, who have this praying mantis-like design, which is very gruesome. The lurkers, which are literally reanimated babies with tentacles sprouting from their back. Jesus Christ. And the pregnants, which are these bulbous looking slashers that if hit in the stomach will release these angry little starfish looking things that swarm you. And okay, like seriously, these enemies are disgusting. Hell, the way that these things kill you are disgusting too. I mean, look at this. Oh god. Shit, man, why? Oh no. Wow. Are you done, man? Holy shit. You could definitely tell they had fun designing the death animations because they look like they're ripped straight from a Mortal Kombat game. Anyways, probably the most disturbing enemy for me is the Divider. A tall, lanky motherfucker wearing a trench coat that, when killed, splits apart into different appendages and still tries to kill you. Honestly, the most unsettling part about these guys is the low howl they give out whenever they're close. What the fuck are you? Ugh, sounds like a dying whale. I don't like that. The sound design in this game in general does everything it can to add to the pants-shittingly scary moments. You of course have the gross out cartoony sound effects of dismembering a limb and the sci-fi noises of the array of weapons, but you also have the absolutely terrifying calls that each of the necromorphs screech, and the loud mechanical noises of the ship to put you on edge. Whenever these sections would come in, the game would get incredibly loud and frantic, as there were typically enemies or other set pieces nearby that warranted the action-oriented score and sound effects. However, I find Dead Space also works within its use of silence. All music is gone, all sound effects are suppressed, and the only thing you can hear is what's going on in Isaac's suit. Unnerving. These quiet parts exist throughout the game. For large parts of Dead Space, Isaac is just walking in the ship, alone, with only his footsteps accompanying him. Of course, the moments come where there'll be an occasional noise on the ship, something moving at the end of the hall, and then a rising tension of the music, much like how it would in a horror movie, all before culminating in the loud, bombastic moment whenever the creator of that noise was revealed and... oh, nothing. Oh, fuck! Yeah, the game doesn't pull any punches when it comes to its scares. Even several hours in, Dead Space still finds new ways to provide fear to the player. Some of my favorite moments are just some of the absolutely fucked up things you see as you're exploring the Ishimura. None of these pose a direct threat to the player, but that doesn't make them any less unsettling. Enemy encounters also kept terrifying throughout the game, even after you killed several dozen of the same types of enemies prior. One of the ways that Redwood Shores keeps this possible is through the use of a procedural placement of its necromorphs. This keeps players guessing where the enemies will be, as outside of the scripted sequences, the placements will be different in every playthrough. The scripted segments definitely still have their scare factor too. One of my favorite examples is a slasher that jumps out at you after you use a workbench to upgrade one of your weapons in the second half of the game. Oh fuck! Fuck you, game. It works so well since the player was shown that these were always safe locations, so there was no danger in checking them out, but the script got flipped in this one level. After this single occurrence, it never happens again, but it still fills you with paranoia, just like how you were paranoid at the beginning of this video when I told you there wasn't going to be any jump scares. These are the moments of Dead Space that click, the moments that bring on so much anxiety during the build-up that they stick with you even several hours after they already happened. This was what I was looking for. This had to be the reason that so many people love this game, or at least, that's what I thought before I started diving deeper into Dead Space's gameplay. Do you like Resident Evil 4? Redwood Shore sure did, and that is the best way I could describe the gameplay in Dead Space. This is an evolution of the over-the-shoulder action-based survival horror that was popularized by games such as RE4. You of course still have your classic survival elements in regards to ammo conservation, inventory management, and choosing whether to engage or flee from the enemy. However, there were a few new things that Dead Space brought to the table to distinguish it from the games that inspired it. First and most noticeably is the ability to move while you are able to aim and shoot. While the aiming still isn't on par with the speed of something such as Gears of War, the speed and flexibility is brought up in order to close the gap between the typical survival horror and third-person shooters. Because of this new level of aim, this allowed the enemies to be able to act more aggressively and require certain areas to be targeted in order to achieve maximum effectiveness. This brings me to my second major difference, the focus on dismemberment. So this is a really badass mechanic, and it's a nice twist on the typical go for headshot approach of most zombie games. Instead, each enemy has has different limbs that must be targeted in order to do any meaningful damage to them. This actually brings me to the enemy design and just how robust the roster is. One thing I really like about Dead Space is how it gradually introduces you to the different types of enemies over the course of the adventure through small cutscenes and encountering some enemies in non-lethal scenarios that show you essentially how the enemy operates. You've got the previously mentioned slashers, which act as the most common fodder that come with an enhanced form later in the game. The leapers, which are typically found in the zero gravity areas, attack tails, and also have an enhanced form. The lurkers, the reanimated babies that shoot projectiles out of their back. Seriously, still so fucking weird. Swarmers, which look to be these little starfish things that, well, swarm you. The infectors, which are these bat-like things that reanimate corpses to make new necromorphs. Pro tip on these guys, anytime you walk into a room full of dead bodies, give them all a good stomp to reduce the number that the infectors can revive. Tentacles, the most sexy of the necromorphs. The pregnants, I stand corrected, this is the most sexy of the necromorphs. The brutes, typically acting as mini bosses. They have heavy armor in the front, so you must take them out from behind. Guardians, which are probably the most unfortunate and boring necromorph to turn into. Pods, which are these little nutsack looking things that fire projectiles. Hunters, which are probably the most intense of the standard necromorphs because they regenerate and have to be killed by special means. The Weezers, which, no, not that Weezer. No, not that one either. Closer, but still no. These guys essentially render the environment toxic with the hot air that they spew like your typical Overwatch player. Exploders do exactly what you think they do. Dividers are gross, creepy fuckers. And finally, Twitchers injected G Fuel straight into their veins before taking on Isaac. Not only do we have all of these standard necromorphs, but we also have a few bosses with the Leviathan, the Slug, and the Hive Mind. That is a shit ton of enemy variety, but thankfully Isaac has quite the arsenal to help him dispatch his foes. Most iconically, we have the Plasma Cutter, an old mining tool that can be used to fire either horizontal or vertical shots to dismember limbs. Next, we have the Pulse Rifle, which can be used as a standard assault rifle or be used to fire bullets in 360 degrees. The Disc Gripper can shoot out saw blades in any direction or have a saw blade spin in place to do damage over time. The Flamethrower shoots a continual spout of flame or an orb that detonates on impact. The Line Launcher acts as a slower, more wide-reaching plasma cutter or can lay down mines. The Force Gun, which shoots out a small shockwave like a shotgun, and finally the Contact Beam, a big fuck-off laser. Quite the unique roster of weapons, and I have to say, I found a use for every single one of them. Unfortunately, you can only carry 4 at a time, so 2 of them will have to remain in the inventory. What weapons you are carrying also determine how frequently you get ammo for that weapon type. So if I'm only carrying the Plasma Cutter and Pulse Rifle, I will mostly get ammo for those 2 weapons, which is exactly what I did for my playthrough. Furthermore, you can upgrade your weapons through these workshops with nodes you can find either in the shop or in the environment. Isaac is also able to upgrade his stasis, which allows him to slow enemies in place, his maximum health, and his air supply. Oh yeah, the air supply thing. So occasionally there will be sections of the game where Isaac will go out to the exterior of the Ishimura. These sections will have 0 oxygen, 0 gravity, or sometimes a combination of both. In the 0 oxygen sections, Isaac will be unable to hear his surroundings while also needing to maintain his breathing through the use of consumables or oxygen refill stations around the area. The 0 gravity sections will also allow Isaac to walk on surfaces he couldn't normally stand on, while also being able to perform long leaps to get to inaccessible areas or get away from enemies. There also exist a bunch of set pieces that look to expand the gameplay of Dead Space even further. You have the stressful section where you encounter the second hunter in Chapter 10, where you have to move blocks to get away from it. There's the asteroid shooting in Chapter 4 that was honestly kind of a pain in the ass, but also the shooting galleries and fucking basketball court that I find so funny to be on this ship. These sections do an excellent job of giving the player a break from the standard gameplay loop while not being too jarring to make you wonder why they exist in the first place. The game is also paced incredibly well by having each chapter last around an hour, meaning every level doesn't overstay its welcome. Difficulty-wise, I strongly advise playing on the hardest difficulty to get the most out of this game. If you scare easily or are not accustomed to third-person shooters, maybe consider dropping the difficulty. To me though, the difficulty is what makes a necromorph such a dreadful force to come across, and if they were any easier to kill, I feel like a lot of the horror would be lost. You combined all of these aspects with the game switching focuses between an equal amount of story, action, and horror, and you have a robust sandbox that Redwood Shores thoroughly explored with this title. Going into this game, I expected to be enthralled with the atmosphere and lore, but what I found was honestly a mechanically rich third-person adventure that offered a smorgasbord of different player options to use and an even wider array of enemy encounters. This was truly a marvelous experience. Dead Space won the hearts of audiences and critics alike, and finally, after all of these years, I can say I see what I was missing out on. While the story was serviceable, the gameplay offered a deep experience for players to sink their teeth into, and the presentation had a beautifully grotesque atmosphere for the players to shit their pants. But what happened after the release of this game? How could something so awesome just disappear? Redwood Shores would go on to release a few more licensed titles before switching studio names to Visceral Games. You like that little rhyme there? Anyways, finally, they could start putting out some more serious stuff and start taking the industry by storm. And the first game they released was Dead Space Extraction, a railgun shooter for the Wii. Oh boy. Alright, this game doesn't look horrible, I guess, but it's a railgun shooter for the Wii, so of course nobody cares. But Visceral would come back strong with their next game, Dante's Inferno, which dared to ask the question, what if we took everything you loved about God of War out of the game and replaced it with some more monotonous gameplay? And yeah, this one didn't do so great either. Thankfully, Visceral returned in 2011 to make an actual sequel to Dead Space 2. This seemed to be a very solid follow-up to the first game, cementing Dead Space as Visceral's flagship franchise. 2013 then saw the release of Dead Space 3. This game had a lot more of an emphasis on action, and it also included microtransactions that were heavily criticized during the release. This resulted in middling review scores and mediocre sales, and the series would go on an indefinite hiatus. Visceral apparently had plans for a non-linear Dead Space 4, but were pulled away to work on such landmark titles such as Army of Two, The Devil's Cartel, and Battlefield Hardline, which, yep, sounds about right. All hope was not lost for Visceral Games, however, as EA was working with Disney on a single-player Star Wars experience that had the Dead Space developers at the helm. Now, they have had their experience with licensed games before, and they have made two phenomenally good games before this. So surely this was about to be the big break that Visceral needed in order to get back into the spotlight, and
Cancel!
The game was canceled before anything was really shown off, and Visceral was shut down by EA in 2017 to join the graveyard of other dead publishers. This was largely due to EA's new focus on stepping away from single-player titles to focus more on the multiplayer side of the industry. Thanks for that, EA. You really know how to put your shareholders' needs first. After the closure of Visceral, things went a little quiet for a while. Nothing new was being worked on for the series outside of the content creation scene on YouTube, which continued to sing praises for the game. Something started to happen in late 2019 though. Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order was released as a single-player Star Wars title by EA, and it was a critical and commercial success. This was followed up by releases of Capcom's Resident Evil 2 and 3 remakes. And this got EA thinking, maybe people like single-player games after all, which the gaming community gave a collective, yeah, you fucking think so, which apparently led to the greenlighting of a remake of the original Dead Space, and guess what? People are fucking hyped for it. The game looks like a faithful recreation of the first with upgraded graphics, but with some new features planned here and there too. To me, it seems like a step above what something like the recent Last of Us Part 1 remake was, as there seems to be new systems and new environments to go along with the updates to animations, sound, lighting, and gameplay. With the remake and the Callisto Protocol coming out very soon, I think it's very safe to say fans of the series are about to be incredibly happy. That plus the recent announcement of Silent Hill 2 really shows it's a pretty great time to be a fan of the survival horror genre. Dead Space was a series that I can say I horribly misjudged. It's very easy for me to see how this game was placed right next to Resident Evil and Silent Hill as the juggernauts of the survival horror genre, and I am incredibly glad I decided to give it a fair chance. Now that the series is back in the spotlight, and hopefully to stay this time, I can't wait to see what new experiences the franchise has to offer. So that's the end of the video. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, consider giving it a like and maybe subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.